welcome to the Deer IQ podcast, where smart hunting begins. I'm Adam Lewis, and we're in our series on hunting controversies and solutions. I am joined by Adam Miller, host of the Bowhunter Chronicles podcast, as we co-air a discussion about the recent Michigan Deer Management Initiative recommendations. How did those meetings with public input for the new regulations actually go, and what will be the outcome for deer hunting in Michigan? We share our takes with some controversial regulations like the youth season restructuring, APRs coming into play possibly, and also possibly earn a buck, and a whole lot more. And if you're new here, Deer IQ is about giving hunters the tools through increased knowledge and skills, not the latest gear fads, to become a consistent and deadly hunter who can pretty much get it done wherever they are with any gear they choose. It's about the education, science, facts, not the fads. That's how you truly become a greater hunter and what Deer IQ is all about. And one of the best ways is through journaling, and we have a free one to use with this podcast. You can download that below. It's really going to help. Okay, so with that, here are a couple things to look for during this episode. What is the hunting culture issue Adam speaks of in Michigan? What seems to be a big fail in the DMI process according to both of us? Do youth seasons help or hurt with the Michigan buck-centric culture, which means our obsession with shooting a lot of bucks instead of does, which leads to an unhealthy and unbalanced deer herd which we have in some parts of the state? And will baiting be reinstated, and is that good or bad? And there's a ton more high IQ stuff in there, so let's get to the podcast and up your Deer IQ. All right, I'm here with Adam Miller. Adam, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so we're talking Michigan regulations today and the deer herd, and that is something that's currently being discussed a lot. And Adam is also a fellow Michigander here and runs a podcast as well, which maybe you know, the Bowhunter Chronicles podcast. But before we jump into this, because there's been a lot the past year with the Michigan DNR admitting basically, hey, you know, we want to and need to make some regulations changes for the better of hunting, for the better of the herd. We had the NDA come out and kind of say some things about Michigan as well during that time. So there's been a lot going on the past year, and especially recently with some the DMI, what the DMI came out with and recommendations. So we're going to get into that stuff. Before we do, though, and before we start throwing questions toward Adam here, Adam, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your podcast, and so people kind of know, if they don't know you, kind of know who you are.
Yeah, so I run the Bowhunter Chronicles podcast. We've been doing it. I think this is our 6th year. We've evolved quite a bit over that time, but I still will say that I'm the world's worst bow hunter, and that's really easy to, kind of like as a recruitment tool, because it's not really for us about egos or anything like that. It's about learning. It's about becoming better hunters. And so if I'm on here saying that I know everything there is to know about hunting, and you look at my wall and you're like, well, there's only a handful of deer on there, like, why am I going to listen to this guy? So when we started, that was like the theme of like very, very inclusive. I've become a much better bow hunter over the past 6 years, talking to all these big buck killers and learning more about, how to kind of systematically break down deer and kind of figure that out. This year I'll be 43 years old. So I've been bow hunting for 30 years, and I'm still learning. And Michigan guy, I've hunted all over the country, but Michigan is where I hang my hat.
Yeah, and there's probably very little competition over the claim of the worst bow hunter. So you're not, arguing with anybody. So is most of your listeners, are they Michigan people? Or are they, I'm guessing, all over? Or?
All over. I mean, so we've been doing the last 2 years we've done we do Patreon, and we've created a big community there, and a lot of it is guys who um, either have like lost their private land and had to move on to public land, or guys that are adult onset hunters and they don't really have like a hunting community, nobody to kind of bounce ideas off of. But that Patreon hunt the first year, we had 30 guys show up. Last year we had 50, and
Wow.
guys from Rhode Island, Texas, Iowa, Illinois, PA, guys from all over. So
Interesting. Very good. So this focus of our discussion is Michigan stuff. I guess if you're outside of Michigan listening to this, we're interested in your thoughts too about, I'd say maybe comment your input on how is the DNR doing things in your state, what's working, what isn't, in contrast to what is going on here. So let's go ahead and jump in here, Adam. So first of all, I'd just kind of ask, what's your take on the current state of things in Michigan and our deer herd, and just how we're doing at managing that currently in the state?
Well, we talked a little bit before the podcast, and I think Michigan has this really long uh, deer hunter culture. And I don't know why, but I think we're trying to hold on to, we're trying to appease that culture. We're so afraid of losing hunters because the hunter numbers are going down. We're saying we could never do this because we're gonna, the hunting community, our hunters are hanging on by a thread. So we have to have 2 bucks. We have to have, all of these other things. There's stuff riddled in there at this point. I'm sure that we'll get into it concerning CWD, and we've had some of the bovine tuberculosis and stuff like that. But I think that's where the current state is Michigan is so concerned about the it seems backwards. I mean, it's in today's day and age, but they're worried about the hunter's feelings instead of like the overall, like, either hunting experience, the deer herd, any of that. I will say the latest thing that they implemented with the mandatory reporting is something that I'm very much a fan of. I've hunted lots of different states. It seems like every other state has mandatory reporting. And especially, perfect example, and it was brought up by one of the guys in Rhode Island. We were just out in Montana bear hunting, but there are quotas, right? So every time you shoot a bear, it has mandatory check-in. They go in, and once you've hit a certain quota of female bears, they shut down that unit because they're preserving the resource. So when we think about mandatory reporting, and it's just this big brother looking at you, trying to steal your hunting spots, it's not necessarily the case from a conservation standpoint. So I'm really a big fan of that.
Yeah, so you're talking there more of the culture, I guess, the culture in Michigan, and how DNR NRC kind of treats that or views that when they go about regulations and stuff like that. I would agree with the mandatory reporting. I think we're a state that's way behind in that. We finally got on the ball. It just it allows them to actually see data in a more real time, right? So I would say that's a good thing. Also, I'll just throw in there this, and we're probably looking at this at slightly different angles. So that's, I think, a good thing, and we'll flesh that out as we get going here. But also this past year, I'd say the overall state of the deer herd in the UP, and I'm not an expert because I don't hunt up there, right? But is the harvest is down up there. The deer herd's down in the UP. The northern lower, it's okay, I'd say. The southern lower, and this is where it gets into what our head DNR guy, Chad Stewart, put out a letter about. The NDA put out a report as well saying that, hey, Michigan has an issue, too many does, right? And Chad was asking everybody, almost begging last year for everybody to shoot more does, right? Because it's getting out of hand and we're not regulating the herd like they feel we should be. And so that was a big thing that came up about a year ago. And those mandatory reportings came back from this past year, and it showed zero change, right? So those had zero effect on what hunter decisions were in the field. Chad also mentioned this culture thing that you bring up of, hey, we're too buck-centric, right? We're or TOO, right? We're focused too much on taking bucks in this state as part of our culture. We need to shift that so we can have a better balanced herd, right? So, and that's kind of where it left off. And then they came out with this, oh, we're going to start these DMIs, which are basically just regular people getting together that forming these teams to discuss some of these issues and make suggestions to our governing body, right? To the NRC, who makes the final vote on these, and the DNR working with them to help do that. And that's kind of where we are now. The DMIs come back with their suggestions, right? So we both read through these. I have made a bunch of notes on this and have thoughts, and these will get further fleshed out. So at the point of us recording this, we don't know the exact outcome, but these are the recommendations. And correct me if I'm wrong, if we even know, but I don't think there's going to be a lot of like changing of these. It's more of, okay, do we understand these? We either will accept or reject these type things. Is that your understanding?
Yeah. So the way that I understand it is these have been proposed and submitted, and the NRC is going to look at them and say, yes, this is something that we want to change, or no, we're going to continue. And that was where, when I was reading through it, I had a little hard time until I got to the bottom page, because it says, this is what we recommend. This is, but there was no, until you got to the actual changes with the strike throughs. It was a little bit muddy reading through the document, I thought.
Yeah. Um, so what are your thoughts? Let's just, I guess, dive into that here. What are your general thoughts on this process, first of all, and how you, it's hard to know because we weren't in it, right? But as far as process wise, what are your thoughts on this?
um, well, I've had some contact with people that were really big in, trying to make these changes, that because this was like a call out to anybody who wanted to apply, and it didn't seem like it was random. It felt like these people were kind of picked and chosen specifically. I actually talked to one of the people that were uh, put on the board from my area. Definitely didn't seem random, but he did a good job. He actually met at our Bowman's Club, and tried to lobby as many people to get there to actually discuss these. So it wasn't like a one man show. It wasn't just one guy's opinion. He was definitely out there trying to garner other opinions for at least our area. But as far as the process goes, it seems very convoluted. You're taking all these people from a whole bunch of different areas, and then they had a very small amount of time to meet, and then they submitted their stuff and they were disbanded. It wasn't like they got to continue or anything like that. So um, I think that there's some improvement in that process where, and I'm like the least political person out there. Like, I think that there should be less government, less overreach, and all that stuff. But if you are going to go that step, now, if let's say that we don't like this or whatever, who do you go to for changes on the next one? Right? There is no continuity. So as far as the process is concerned, uh, I think that there definitely could be some improvement there.
Yeah, and I watched some of the presentation of this. I think it was a couple weeks ago now, uh, where some of the, I think it was the Upper Peninsula guys on the DMI got up and addressed the NRC, and they literally said it was a train wreck, right? Just how it was handled. And as I read through these recommendations, that's one thing that came out to me was, the DMI makes a recommendation, and there's a whole bunch of examples we can get into, but And then the DNR makes comments back about it. And it just seemed like there was an overall lack of communication. Like, if the DMI is going to recommend this means they've talked about it, right? And if the DNR is overseeing this, which they were, Chad Stewart, I think, was the main head on that. How come there wasn't communication to where, beforehand, before they make some recommendation, that the DNR comes back and says, "Oh, we can't do that because of this." Like, it just seems like there should have been a lot more back and forth before even making these recommendations, for it to seem like this is actually being used or being helpful, right? That's was kind of the point, I believe, was to get public involved. But then if it's not run correctly, if there's poor leadership or there's not communication through that process, how can you get good results, I guess?
Yeah, and that's what I was saying when I was reading through it, and it was kind of muddy. Is like they recommended one thing, and then it seemed like they gave some stats that, I mean, I can think of like the Liberty Hunt and the Youth Hunt being one, said that there was no change and there would be little effect or whatever.
Right.
And then when you go down to the recommendations, it still says that it was recommended, and that's what's up for debate or like on the docket essentially. So it wasn't, like I say, it was very muddy, like in my opinion, and it should have, I think they should have had a little bit more communication or like fleshing out discussion before, I suppose that they should have, or I guess I would like to see it that it's a collective and not our recommendations in this. Like, I feel like they should have sat down with like a arbitrating third party and said, okay, now where can we come together on this, instead of like, this is what we think, these are our stats, but we're going to still figure it out. We're still the end all be all.
Yeah. Where's the come together? Because even taking a step back from that, in my opinion, my thoughts are like, okay, what are our goals here to begin with? Were those clearly stated and set out for the DMI? You can read through this and kind of get some things like, were the goals for example, the reduction of does in southern Michigan, and things that would help with that. What were the actual goals? And even back from that, I have an issue. If you look at our last Michigan deer management plan in the state, I think the goals are really poor there because there's no way to measure them. And so I think we should even started there. Like, getting back to the actual goals of this management plan in the deer herd. Get ones we can measure, and then we can make regulations to help reach those goals, and we can measure if we reached them or not. Right? Those aren't in place, but even with this, the DMI, was there any of that clearly stated to them? I'm not sure, but yeah, they should have worked together. It felt like a little bit more, right? Like, if, for example, and we can dig into some of these here. One of them is the HAP one that kind of stuck out to me as a simple one, right? Okay, the DMI, I think, recommended pursuing more HAP opportunities, which is basically private land that's put in a program so anybody can hunt it, right? Because in the southern southern part of the state, I think they said 97% is private owned. So you have an issue with access. And I think that is a big issue. Uh, and so, okay, they recommend more HAP land. And then the DNR basically says that's expensive because we have to pay them and we don't have the money. End of story, right? Kind of. That's just an example, right? So, what are your thoughts on some of these regulations, maybe that one, or we can dig at some of these other recommendations here uh, specifically?
Well, I'm looking at this from like a hunter, not necessarily like a hunter experience, but kind of like governing from a culture. And what I had said before the podcast is, I think you're looking at this from a very much like a conservation standpoint, as well as like the health of the deer herd. And I'm kind of looking at it from a like a hunter standpoint, and I mean, we were just up at TAC and, had a big cookout and had drinks and all this stuff. And there was a lot of very heated discussions over these types of things that had zero to do with like the health of the herd and more about like my feelings and not me specifically, but whoever was stating like why they feel a certain way.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of looking at it from that perspective. And one of the things that you had just said there was we can't do Hapland because we didn't have any money. And so one of the things that was in there was, if Michigan goes to one buck state or something like that, we're going to lose all of this license revenue.
Right.
And the earn a buck thing, I mean, to me, that seems so simple. Is even if you wanted to have 2 bucks, even if you went to the earn a buck or shoot a buck and get a second buck, we just changed the license price from $20 to the same $40 that it would be. You keep the same revenue, and none of this was put in there as far as like, does the license price change? There was nothing in there about pricing. But when you're talking about money, if we go to earn a buck or earn a second buck, you could charge $40 for that first license. We have continued mandatory check-in. You check in your buck, and then you're issued automatically your second tag.
Mm-hmm.
And that becomes your restricted tag. And that's something that I've said for quite some time is right now in Michigan, when you buy a combo license, you get a unrestricted tag based on wherever you're at in the state when the antler point restrictions, and then a restricted tag that has to be 4 on one side. If Adam goes out, or if I go out and I kill an 8-point buck on opening morning, I can tag it with my restricted tag, and I can kill a spike on the last day of the season if it's legal in my APR zones. Not the way that was intended, that your second buck. I mean, I understand maybe that is 2 bucks, whatever, but chronologically, you could then get your restricted tag and you killed an 8-point, and now you still have to kill one with 4 on one side, which kind of does 2 things. It, gives some of those younger deer a chance, perhaps. And I know that there's only a very small amount. I think it's like 7% of hunters kill 2 bucks every year. But you keep the same revenue, and that's in that earn a buck. And earn a buck, if you have to shoot a doe first, changes the whole like
dynamic.
Everything that we do in Michigan hunting. But it's failed in a lot of states. I mean, and we kind of follow Wisconsin, and Wisconsin had an abysmal showing of that, and that's why they went away from it. So of the things that are on here right now, at least that are at the top of my list of things, is like that 1 buck or earn a buck. If you were going to go to an earn a buck and you were worried about revenue, that would be the way that I think it would work best for our state, for our culture, for our hunters. Right.
Yeah. In referencing that, so that's, I think, the Lower Peninsula, number 3 and 4 on the DMI list. Something that stuck out to me there, and yeah, I'd agree with that. It's, again, there wasn't this dialogue, it appears, back and forth of, okay, if you guys do that, how would we come to this solution? It wasn't this, okay, let's get together and figure out, we have this problem, how do we get to the solution? And you communicate, and the DNR says, oh, we can't do that, or we fear this. Let's work on this to come up with some solution that benefits everybody and meets our goals. It was just, oh, we're going to, say that isn't a good idea because we feel it won't, it'll hurt the budget, basically, right? And that's what stuck out to me was in the DNR's response, their language, they said stuff like could result, DNR does not know, need more, this or that, basically saying we fear this, but we don't know if this will cause this. So we're going to not recommend this. And it's like, well, then why don't you get that data, right? The DNR prides itself, and when I interviewed Chad Stewart, they're always talking about data. They have to go to the NRC with data, right? So where's the data to support what they are saying about this stuff. And if they don't have it, they need to get it, right? Like, how come they aren't doing surveys about these things that are always, they've been around for a while, right? The talk APRs, one buck, all this stuff has been around for a long time. How come they don't have that data? And they do have some data, and we can get to this maybe in a second, but they do have some data. They just don't seem to use it, or they forget they have it type stuff. But that's my thoughts on that is, yeah, and I agree with you. Like, how come we can't come to some solutions through dialogue?
I really have a problem with that survey data, because whatever they have is very skewed, because it's the only the people that turn in. And this is a discussion that I had with Chad Stewart, is that you get this, if you get the same amount of surveys back every year and you send them out, you're kind of getting the same people that do it. And I can tell you that there's, in the circle that I hunt with, there's very few people who receive surveys, and there's even less that turn them in. Now, I can tell you this: in the UP, our camp gets a ongoing survey, like not after the season, but like that's sent before the season, where you write the number of hunters in there, what they saw each day, what the harvest was, kind of like the same after the fact survey, but it's happening in real time. And I think maybe there's more accurate reporting, or maybe, people who have these large farms get that ahead of time. But like I said, it's always something that we receive earlier in the season. So maybe there is a little bit tighter of a microscope up in the UP, because they're trying to manage it from, what it was to what it is. I don't know. I feel like that's one thing that they did do right. Because I do have, I started hunting in the UP. We've got a camp up there that's 240 acres, and it's been in the family forever. And so in the early 90s, the county that we're in had the most deer per square mile in the state of Michigan. And now the UP, the deer herd is way down. There's lots of different factors there, and I think they're trying to figure it out. But I would say that it's a completely different, it's almost like a different state than
Right.
the lower peninsula. So I think that's one thing, by splitting up the recommendations, that they're doing correctly. But those surveys, I think, are very skewed, just in the sense of, like, if you have the same people reporting every year, you're going to get the same data.
So does that get back to your thoughts on how we're getting them information, like as far as from the public on stuff? Is that kind of what you're getting at? Because if, like, how else are they going to do it, type thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the mandatory reporting is kind of like the deer check-in is kind of the only way that we can look at, and understanding that some people aren't going to use it, but you're going to get a much more accurate idea of, how many hunters are out there, how many, when these guys are in the woods, when are the most effective times, and obviously that's going to be, the gun season, I would say. But I think that the harvest overall is more important than, how many deer I saw, how happy was it? If you read the surveys, how happy were you with your hunt? All of that sort of stuff. And if you say, well, I saw 2 deer this day, 2 deer this day, 2 deer this day, do you know if they're the same deer? Are they different deer? Like, what is any of that? How is that relevant, other than, I guess you could have a number of days in the field versus days with successful hunts. I don't know. Some of that seems like unnecessary information.
Right. Yeah. It gets back to the questions. Do you have good questions, first of all? Because I will say the DMI, they're really pushing it, and the DMI came out with a survey before the groups got going. I don't know if you took that or not, but that one was super generic.
Oh yeah.
After taking it, I was like, okay, what is this going to give them that's of value, right? So, yeah, I totally get that. And, how are they getting this data on a lot of things? But yeah, the mandatory reporting is part of that and is helpful. What do you think? Let's keep talking about these different, I guess, recommendations here. The buck-centric culture. Do you think any of these are going to help fix that? And you talk about culture and, what people are when you're just chatting. And I will say this, that I think is a thing, maybe a challenge for guys, is, the feelings part. I think we need to lean less into that and more into reality of the data and what's really going on, and how do we make decisions based off those things. Because like you said, like, oh, I feel this or that because when I go out I see this or that, but is that a reflection of reality? Even when we get into, and I'll bring up youth hunting and stuff like that, the youth hunt, is that working? There's a big issue with hunter retention. The data says the youth hunts don't help with hunter acquisition or retention. That's the data, right? But it feels like youth hunting is a great thing. I'm not against having youth hunts, but they aren't accomplishing a goal of more hunters, right? New hunters. They don't. The data says they don't. So what can we do different to get more hunters? But a lot of people get hung up in the feelings around youth hunt. Oh yeah, it's such a great thing and it's helping in these ways. The reality, it isn't, right? So those type of things are, kind of hard pills to swallow, but we need to look at, okay, what's the actual reality here? What's the actual data saying, right? So back to that buck-centric culture we have, right? We have 2 buck tags. If you look at the data, it's flipped in our state, and this is where I get into the what's a healthy deer herd, right? What does that look like? Balance ratios. And I talked to quite a few people about this year. Kip Adams at the NDA, right? Talking about it's fairly balanced, as close you can to a 1-to-1 sex ratio. It's multiple age classes in the deer herd structure. It's having healthy habitat, for the deer, enough food for them, right? Those are the big things. Are we getting toward that, right? Is that even a goal of ours? Which it isn't in our state. It just isn't. But we have this buck-centric mentality. If you look at the data from the last 2 years, in youth season, youth hunters take 3.6 bucks for every 1 doe. That's very buck-centric. And it goes down as the season goes, but the average is 1.32 bucks for every doe. And to keep a balanced herd, it needs to be flipped, right? That's the reality of the biology and the data. So we have this buck-centric culture. What do you think about that? And as far as like these new proposals, if any of these go through, do you think those will help with that or hurt that? Or what do you think about the solution there? Okay, so here's your high IQ moment. So this episode is a little different than our norm as we get into the realm of opinions more than our usual just facts and science. This leads me to ask us all, what makes a valid opinion? Is it just because I feel a certain way, or just because I personally thought of X, Y, or Z, you fill in the blank? Or is an opinion valid because of data, facts, or truth to back it up? For me, it's easy to get wrapped up in feelings or emotions on an issue or my own self-interest, even in deer hunting rules and regulations. But I want to challenge us all to move toward what I feel is the higher road, making sure our opinions are backed by strong facts and strong arguments as the why they are the best idea or course to take. Why do I think 1 buck tag is a good idea versus a 2 buck tag limit? I should be able to back that up with a results-based argument that's not only good for me, but good for everyone else and also the good of the deer herd. These are tough conversations, but something to think about if we truly want to become greater hunters and true stewards. And do you know your deer IQ? Do you think you're deer smart? Well, why don't you take the Deer IQ test and find out? It's fun and easy, and you can share it with a buddy and compare your score to theirs and see who does better. That is linked below. And I want to let you know about an opportunity I'm opening up now for a few people. If you struggle to be consistent year after year on the top deer where you hunt, and sometimes find yourself guessing on what to do next or feel like you're chasing a ghost buck around, our new surgical hunting small group may be for you. Members learn the proven surgical hunting method that anyone can apply to really up their odds and transform into a consistent, deadly hunter. This is a 6-month interactive group and includes coaching to help you apply these strategies to your hunting situation. It's truly an investment in yourself as a hunter, so email me with questions and how to sign up for your spot in this limited member group. Okay, and now back to the podcast. We have this buck-centric culture. What do you think about that? And as far as like these new proposals, if any of these go through, do you think those will help with that or hurt that? Or what do you think about the solution there?
I have a hard time because, again, like I said, I come at this from a very, like I'm looking at the overall health of hunting, but I also look at like the hunting experience, and I can't do that without taking like some of the feelings out of it, right? And I have a hard time with the youth hunt, and again, there was tons and tons of discussion amongst my peers at the Total Archery Challenge about the youth hunt and should they be able to, should there be antler point restrictions on that? Is and what it comes down to is those feelings are fairness. Like it's like, it's not fair that, and when one guy told me, he said, well, how would you feel if you were, found this deer like in July and you put all your cameras out and and then some kid just comes in there and kills your deer, during the youth hunt. And I'm like, well, it's not my deer, first of all. And I'm assuming that this 7 or 8 year old kid isn't doing all the work. So his dad or his family's doing the exact same amount of effort and everything that I am. But, I have an 8-year-old daughter. She shot her first deer last year in the regular season. So we didn't even use the youth hunt. She shot a small buck and she was elated. Where I have a problem with antler point restrictions, with having to pick or choose, like whether you can or can't shoot a deer, is like, I do not like, and I understand that this is this way in many parts of the country, many parts of our state. But I always look at everybody's like, and because of the culture that we have, but I look at everybody's first or last hunt. So I look at that kid's first hunt, and there's all these deer out there and super excited. And we're telling them they can't shoot that deer that came out there, that they took that time off. And with kids in the youth hunt specifically, I think of it in terms of, you and I are about the same age. So if we look at, I would imagine we could probably go back to the data and look at when the internet came into play and then the number of new hunters. The world is moving so fast. And I remember, whether it was sports or girls or whatever, like we always had other stuff distracting us, other things to do. And if we're not going to be able to, that kid, those parents, they're taking time away from something to go out there and hunt that youth hunt, and to be like, well, we took this time, but we're going to tell you can't, we found a great spot, but it was only bucks, so we couldn't shoot anything. Like we just wasted our time that we're going to be pulled in so many other directions. And then the other side of that, whether it's antler point restrictions or we're dictating, I think of like, if you were on your last hunt with your grandpa who was from the 30s who used to just kill things to survive. And it's the last time you wheeled him out to the blind and all that stuff. And you're sitting there with a gun and a 4-point or a spike comes out and you're not able to share that last experience with him because it doesn't have 3 on one side or 4 on one side. That's where I get, I would rather have one buck with no antler point restrictions and that's the end of it than trying to like micromanage everybody's hunt, everybody's experience. And so for the youth hunt going to antlerless only, I think outside of like the impact that it's having or whatever, I think the idea is for like a safety concern. Because if we are saying that there's access as being a problem and you've got a young child and you're going to take them out on public land for Michigan's gun opener, is going to be a much different experience as far as like a safety type thing than it is in September.
Interesting. Yeah. So if I could hear what you're saying there, you're saying you'd rather not, I guess, restrict people in general, right? And
I'm fine restricting them with one buck, with one deer. Make your choice, and that's it.
But in youth season, you're saying because there was a recommendation from the NRC, one of the NRC guys, not the DMI in the Lower Peninsula, which I thought was interesting. They didn't recommend it, but one of the NRC members recommended doe only for youth. That pre-season hunt, and so you're saying you'd be against that?
Yes, like I said, and I understand, and I don't think of it as like I want. I think that there is some level of expectation, right? But kids start off they don't start off riding motorcycles. They start off on bikes with no pedals and then training wheels, and they get eased into this. And I understand we didn't have that, so that's not fair. I don't even understand why there's a youth season.
Yeah,
but I think that has to be taken into consideration a little bit.
No, I think it's a total bogus argument, guys, that say it isn't fair. I mean, we need to be adults. Let's just be honest here. So the fairness thing is a silly argument to me. I just think we need to get over that one. The thing that makes sense to me, though, and I'm actually for a doe-only youth hunt, is you can still enjoy a hunt and not shoot something. So I guess I'll counter your argument with that. Like, you can still go out there and see deer and not have to shoot something. That's still a hunt, right? That's still some moment you shared, a memory you have, right? And I think the big picture for me is, if in the Lower Peninsula especially we have this doe problem, if we have a buck-centric culture problem where we just have this thing of I'm going to shoot a buck over a doe every day, right? If it's out there, I'm going to shoot a buck over a doe. That's the culture we have. That's what the data kind of shows too. And so in youth season, like, how are we going to change this culture? Well, we have to teach that change, right? And one way we teach it is through mentor hunts, right? So I go out with a kid, I teach him about hunting, I teach him about all the parts of it, right? And part of that is that we're going to have to start teaching is I can pass up bucks and shoot does, right? That's the education part of changing the culture. And so for me, if we implement that, and apparently, according to the data, we aren't doing good at that, right? We're shooting bucks, 3.6 bucks for every one doe in youth season. So that tells me we're not doing a very good job at educating that, right? So if we change it to doe only, in my opinion, that starts changing that culture. It starts educating these young kids that, hey, I can see bucks in a bean field, which is probably where most people hunt in youth season, and I can pass a buck up and shoot a doe, and that's totally cool, right? And it starts ingraining that mentality in the younger generations. That's the biggest thing for me. It isn't because they take so many deer that it's really going to tip the scale in that regard, because that isn't the case. But it's this education thing, right? Changing the culture type thing is my angle on that one.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's a great take, and I do enjoy the back and forth, the conversation, and I've never really looked at it that way. But the only counter to that, I guess, is if you fast forward 2 months and light breaks on November 15th, there still is there, and that buck in that bean field is a 3-year-old buck, and you're passing that, but 2 months, like to the day later on November 15th, you're shooting the buck. It's kind of a counter thing, and I think the reason that they're taking more animals is because there's no pressure. They're still on their summer patterns. They're easier to find, and this is all just anecdotal, right?
Right.
But I just am curious as to like how that translates down the road. I understand it. I mean, I guess the only way that you would, I guess that like I said, like we talked about earlier, the conversation, the compromise would be to have an antler point restricted youth hunt,
Mm-hmm.
so
Yeah.
that you were saying, hey, we have to let the little ones go to shoot
Right.
these ones or something like that, because that's what we're asking of the adults, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think if you play it out, and one of the issues also is the retention thing, the hunter retention thing, right? So the reality is that people taking their kids out youth hunting are already hunters, right? It's a hunting family, and there's tons of data to show this. The DNR knows it, right? Youth seasons aren't creating new hunters. It's just an opportunity for existing hunter families to take kids and youth out, right? So it's not making new hunters. So the question is, how do we get new hunters, and how do we keep people hunting? Recruitment and retention, right? And the data, you probably know this, it shows that retention or recruitment, for example, is better for middle-aged people, right? Adult onset, you mentioned it earlier. That's the target, right? That's the people that I can actually get into and stay hunting much easier than a kid. The last U.S. Fish and Wildlife Survey from 2000 2015 shows that child hunters are down 51%. So, the question is, how do we get kids into hunting better and keep them hunting better? And so, my argument with that is, okay, so if we take a kid out hunting in this youth season and say, okay, you can only shoot a doe, and they shoot a doe, you still taught them the same things. They still had the experience. They've shot a deer. That's great. But they can't shoot those bucks. Like, what is drawing them into the regular season? Well, it's the fact that they actually can then, right? So it's this idea of dangling the carrot, that motivation. What's the motivation to get kids into hunting long term, into the regular season? All those things. I think you have to dangle the carrot, so to say, to get them to go into it and say, hey, I saw this big buck, during the youth hunt. I'd really like to hunt that buck, but I'm going to have to now enter the real season. And that propels them forward, right? If they can do that early on, it kind of cuts that off at the knees, the desire, the reason to go forward, in my mind, right? Just the psychology of that type thing, I think, is the argument there. But that's my thoughts on retention, recruitment, and all that. What else from this stuck out to you as far as good, bad, otherwise, specific, maybe recommendations, or ones that were maybe not on the list that you thought would be helpful?
Well, again, from like I said, from my from the hunter side of it, from looking at it as a consumer of these rules, right? Instead of just looking, because I think most of the hunters are going to say, "Oh, we want a better herd," but they don't know what that means. They want better bucks. They want better. Um, they want a better hunting experience, and whether that's seeing better class deer, that's why at least a lot of the guys that I know hunt out of state and things like that. A couple of things that stuck out to me that are maybe like diametrically opposed, but still for that hunter experience and things, would be making the muzzleloader season an actual muzzleloader season again, instead of allowing any legal method of take. I understand that that's, maybe against the wholesale doe harvest type thing that we need here in Michigan to kind of, balance out the herd a little bit. But that's an extra 2 or 3 weeks of gun season, depending on how it lays out. I think 9 days per season or whatever it is, of an extended gun season. So I would like to see that go back to the regular muzzleloader season. And then the other thing is the baiting allowed in the areas not affected by CWD or whatever. And that one I'm not necessarily a fan of, but I also don't have a problem with it because I spend enough time on public land. I spend enough time at the gas station or Walmart or wherever where they're still selling bait. There's absolutely no enforcement. And so I feel like it's, if you're not going to enforce a law, and it's just going to take more resources away from maybe some places that we need COs or wherever, what is the point of having a rule that's 100% not enforced?
Right.
So those are the two that at least stuck out to me, as far as things that I, even with the baiting thing, like I just have to agree on the basis of there's no there's no enforcement.
Correct. Yeah, there's no enforcement. We sell bait all over the place all season long, right? I don't see bait piles out on state land. And I hunt a lot of state land here in mid-Michigan, mid-lower Michigan. I don't see bait piles there, but people are baiting all over the place, right? So, yeah, what good is it type thing? I don't see them putting that back in though. They're pretty strong on their stances of CWD and tuberculosis, in the fact that they think that bait piles are gonna somehow help spread that. But yeah, and then the muzzleloader one, I honestly have mixed feelings on that. I think keeping it, having a super long gun season, I don't think is helpful for the herd. I think it stresses the herd out more, but as the DNR points out, not that many people are actually using it to take deer, as far as the data goes. So is it really making a difference or not? I don't know. Some of that's maybe principle type thing. And what I feel is left out of here is they didn't talk about restructuring anything, any of the seasons. Let's say, for example, gun season, right? If we're concerned about, a buck-centric culture, we have a gun season that kicks off in the heat of the rut, right? And we have those 2 buck tags, right? We'll see what they do with the buck tag thing, but we didn't talk about any change of season dates or anything like that at all. But we'll see with this. So I think we're kind of wrapping up here. Any other thoughts, Adam? And we're going to co-air this. So if you're listening on the Bowhunter Chronicles, I invite you to check out Deer IQ. You can listen to that wherever you listen to podcasts. We have a YouTube channel. Look us up there, where you just focus on more the educational side of deer hunting and really digging into that. And I start out programs with questions and things to get people thinking. We have a journal, and we also have a blog at the driq.com. So I invite you to check that out. And if you're listening to DRIQ, check out Bowhunter Chronicles. That's Adam's stuff over there. But any thoughts here as we wrap up? And I guess things to maybe get people thinking about, how do we get involved in this process other than just talking about it?
So one thing I would say for this, and I mentioned it earlier, is, find yourself, either, Michigan bow hunters are great. Michigan Bow Hunters Association, Michigan Longbow Association, any of the conservation clubs, there's one in just about every county for sure, many in different towns, where you can find some of these people who are, either on these boards, who are putting money towards these changes, where you can have these discussions and surround yourself with people. And, things like the Michigan Bow Hunters Association, Michigan Longbow Association, they're the lobbying group for at least, we're very bow hunter centric, right? So they're the voice of the Michigan bow hunter. So find those groups and either send them your $30 a year, become more involved, because those are the guys that are really out there on the front lines, making our voice heard.
Yeah, thanks for your thoughts on that, Adam. Thanks for doing this podcast with me, this co-podcast. I'd say my last thoughts are, in general, and this could be any state, there's a lot of things going on in different states. We've got trail camera stuff going on and bans there, and that's a whole discussion in itself. But find a way to get involved, not just sit around, and it's easy to do, sit around and complain about stuff, but how can you actually get involved in a positive way? Some of this is tough and it's frustrating, but I think that's what we need to do as hunters, and as best we can stick together on things and not be fighting each other, even though we might disagree on some things, right? Finding a way for hunters to continue to, promote hunting. So again, great talking, Adam. Thanks for coming on, and thanks for doing this together.
Absolutely. Anytime.
All right, and now for your high IQ takeaways and challenges. What do you think is the right solution to involving both public input and good deer science to drive deer hunting regulations? And why do you think that? And next time, I'm airing some new firsthand information and conversations around the Mitch Rampolla buck and people that knew him at the time it was taken. Was there really a fire that potentially burned up the trophy? And what happened when I knocked on Mitch's door? Some very interesting stuff in there to reveal. You won't want to miss it, and I'll see you then.